Good afternoon, Michael Malice here. Let that be your welcome for the next hour. We have with us a really exciting, very special return guest, Melissa Chen. Melissa is one of the co-founders of Ideas Beyond Borders. I have described you in the past as the most annoying guest I've ever had, which is true. You also famously were the only person who had to leave Rogan because you had a panic attack midway through the episode, which was funny. What I want to talk to you about, and this is actually before we start talking about free speech, because I think you have a unique perspective. Americans are oblivious about how free speech, so-called, works in other countries, and they have this really naive idea, I think, that most countries are largely the same, and they don't appreciate how really special and unique Americans have it, and that it's not at all the norm. But before we get to that, you and I have been hanging out, like when you ever come to Austin, I think we've gotten pretty close, and I feel a lot closer to you than a lot of people I've known for years. And when that happens, I'm always curious, what's the source of this? Like, I have a lot of friends in recovery, and one thing in recovery is like, if you have an emotional response, try to figure out where this is coming from. I'm like, why do I feel so safe around Melissa and so bonded? And then I was hanging out last week with Michaela Peterson, and I think I figured it out. And I want to hear your thoughts, because in the same way that, like, hold on, no, you haven't even told you my thesis, my hypothesis yet. So in the same way that I'm not a wine drinker, but if I sat down with a sommelier and they're like, okay, here's a dry wine and a sweet wine, which do you like better? Here's a red and a white, which do you like better? They can do process of elimination and be like, okay, you like red, you dry red, so you should be drinking these, right? So Michaela and I are both 0 on the politeness metric and like 100 on the openness metric. And I
Mm.
think I figured out that that's my kind of person. And I think that that's you as well. And that when I meet someone who's like that, I know we're going to get on because A, if they have a problem, they're going to tell me. So they're not going to be conflict averse. And they're also going to accept me because they're not going to be judgy. Or if they don't like me, they're just not going to spend time with me. I want to hear your thoughts. Does that describe you accurately?
It does. When you made that statement, I was actually thinking immediately. First thing that came to my mind was, I think you have this. It's obvious your inner troll kind of orientation kind of matches mine. And but beyond that, after seeing, I've been to your house now a few times. You have this remarkable kind of lowbrow, highbrow predilection where you appreciate this like edgy meme lord world, kind of like lowbrow stuff, toilet humor, trolling. But then you also have this eclectic, like very highbrow, very cultured. I mean, you have probably some of the most eccentric tastes I've ever come across. And so I think we appreciate that. And I know that you have this thing about like people that are NPCs or have no inner monologue. And you kind of collect idiosyncratic people, you
Oh yeah,
enjoy them.
yeah.
So I think that's also why we kind of jive. But yeah, I think the open it's interesting because a lot of like, people that we hang around in like sort of more center right media circles can be very close minded. It kind of goes with the conservatism.
Yes.
So it's hard to find people with like high trait openness, but also on the right. Although I
Yeah.
think that's changing because of the tech right.
Yes, yeah, right, and the word "right" is, has a lot of different nebulous meanings. That's interesting that you agree. So you touched upon something that's kind of cool, because my episode with Jordan Peterson just dropped yesterday as we record, and one of the things in that episode is I'm like, okay, I'm going to use this opportunity, because if there's one person on earth that I could have dinner with, it's Camille Paglia, who was like the person
Mm,
who I wanted to be when I was a kid, like as a role model for career wise,
right.
and she constantly, and I didn't know what the hell she was talking about because I'm in high school reading her work, talked about Warhol and the idea of taking low culture in a high art concept, and the point that these distinctions between opera and like pop music are completely ahistorical and overblown. Like, what we regard now as high art was often for the masses back in the day. So to have this artificial distinction is ridiculous. And just because something's a song from like a boy band doesn't mean it can't be constructed very well and really be some like a masterpiece for what it's trying to be. And you
Yeah.
also see this with like all these like cooking like shows where like Anthony Bourdain, when he goes to like eat street food, he's like
Yeah,
treating
yeah,
himself, but it's not ironic. It's like they're not trying to be fine dining. They're trying to be street food. And this is a
exactly.
masterpiece of street food. So you can appreciate it on that level. So Polly is the one who really taught me that. And it also bothers me because conservatives have bought into this idea that art is for like bougie snobs, and it's not. It's for everyone. Just have to know how to appreciate it. Just like comedy, like there's different types of comedies. A lot of it's trash, and Sturgeon's law is what 90% of everything is crap. But there's stuff out there for you. You don't buy into this New York Times rhetoric that this is for these certain, like, if you haven't gone to Yale, you can't appreciate a good painting. It's absolutely crazy, and it does a disservice to people on the right.
Yeah, and also this idea of like pretentious twattery kind of
Right.
being more ensconced on the left, actually, in more recent years. I mean, they're the ones who have tried to gatekeep art in
Yes.
general, in so many ways. I mean, you kind of saw this when Trump was, doing his whole like McDonald's thing where he was working there.
Yeah.
The disdain that people have
Right.
for McDonald's. It's kind of emblematic of this kind of snobbishness when it comes to like gatekeeping culture, as like this is highbrow, this is lower, and I think that's why Trump pisses them off so much too,
Yes.
as a person, because he's, by all accounts, like just this very powerful man that has been in elite social circles in New York, but he never acted that way. Like
Right.
his personal tastes are kind of lowbrow, like
They're
common man.
tacky. Gold toilets, this is new money. That's not how
Exactly.
wealthy people back in the day. It's new money.
Exactly. WWE, he loves
Yeah.
his Eastern European women. Like he's a lowbrow guy. He doesn't act in the way that, most people that you would meet at these like very fine, country clubs or exclusive parties. I mean, he would not his tastes compared to like all the tastes of the people that go to like the Met Gala, for example,
Right.
could not be more different. He orders his steak well done. He puts ketchup on it,
I know.
and I think that aesthetic, like it annoys people. It grates on them.
Yeah, and because I think for a lot of them, the emperor has no clothes. They have this high status, but they know it's based on nothing. And I'll give you an example that's apolitical, which is, as some people watch the show know, I'm a big denim head, right? And I've got my collection of denim, and I've got 30 pairs, one for every day of the month. And when you hear like someone's into denim, they think, oh, you're buying $1,000 pairs of jeans. You're not. Those are the awful people, and people who like denim as a hobby have no respect for that. Because everyone who likes denim also has a pair of Levi's, because Levi's are like the ultimate like normal jean. Then you're gonna have the fancier ones for like $100 to $200, which is not cheap, but isn't crazy. If you have one pair of jeans that's $200, you're hardly, it's not worth commenting over. So the people buy the really expensive stuff like Nordstrom's, whatever, they're not the aficionados. Those are the snobs. And in
Exactly.
every field, the people who know their stuff, if you're a real foodie, not someone just reads, New York Magazine, you're gonna know the spot that's people don't know about, and it's not gonna be the most expensive place, but you're gonna have that amazing experience. And then you got the expensive place, which is there to rob people of their money. And a lot of times it's amazing. That's true, but it doesn't take any sophistication or knowledge to know about that fancy place. So it's a complete bluff. And I wish more people in the middle and on the right understood how much of this is about posturing and it's fake. But it's understood even within these scenes. Like the people in the scenes don't buy into this. It's just the people in the media who present it are the ones who are presenting it a certain
Performative.
way.
Yep, it's
Performative.
performative.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Man, you collect so many things. I mean, you collect toothpaste. It's kind of
Okay,
random.
so let's talk about this. No, no, no. Okay, let's talk about this. There's difference in collect. Okay, I didn't know we were gonna go here, but let's do it. There's difference between collecting and rabbit holes. Okay, so collecting is I got like all these books, action figures, and everything's on the wall. I will go on rabbit holes. It's like, okay, if I use toothpaste, let me try 50 different kinds and then go through them all. And whichever one I like the most, I'm going to use that one. It's just a fun little hobby to do, but it's not really collect them because I actually use them.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Oh,
Because
yeah,
like you
yeah.
said like, the weirdest flavors, and I thought you don't use them like your action figures in the plastic. You
No, no,
just
no. They're there to be used.
okay, okay.
Yeah. And so there's a few like High Smile is this brand that just came out and everyone's all obsessed with it. Like Rogan follows them on Twitter, on Instagram, and they've got all these weird, cool, like they've got Red Bull, they've got Gummy Bear, they've got rainbow straps, cheesecake, like all these cool, fun flavors. Um,
Does your audience know about the Black Man toothpaste that you have?
it's called Darky.
Yeah.
So back in the day, which because the whole point was when you had like uh, um, what's it called? When people were blackface, what's that called again? Minstrel shows.
Minstrel,
Yeah,
yeah.
they would have shoe polish on their face, and the thing is, their teeth were very white. So that they had toothpaste called Darky, which had a minstrel show guy on it, and it's the toothpaste because your teeth are going to be really white. Then that was very controversial, and they called it Darlie. It's still for sale in Southeast Asia, and he's not. He's it's the same guy, but they have him like blue and white, like this kind of like cut out, almost like the people that cover the book. You can't tell what race they are really. So
Yeah.
it's still available on eBay. Darlie, you can get it imported. I haven't used it because that toothpaste is like 40 years old. So that is
Uh,
one that is one old toothpaste I have not used. That's the one.
it is classic. I actually grew up with it in Chinese. It's called Heiren Yaka, which literally translates to black man toothpaste. And it was called that. I actually don't, woke has not really hit Southeast Asia. Uh, so I think it remained that way at least till like 2000s.
But the thing that's also annoying is it's not insulting. It's like this man on the toothpaste has really white teeth. Like it's not like you're being offensive to. It's not like you're putting him down. You're elevating him. Zadie Smith wrote a whole book about this called White Teeth, and the premise is that white. I haven't read it, but it's a huge hit that like white people think black people have whiter teeth than they do. But it's also like there's something called the Jewfish, and they changed the name, but it's called a Jewfish because the meat is so clean, it passes higher Jewish standards. But because it just
Oh,
has a reference, like we can't have that. And now they changed the Goliath grouper, but that's the thing.
well, that's fat shaming though.
What do you mean? Oh, it's not that. Oh, there.
Goliath.
Yeah, that's true. So
So
let's talk a bit about. I want to talk about internationally, but you're in the UK now, and as free speech being something that you're very passionate about and have done a lot of work toward, I'm curious, Francis, our friend Francis Foster of trigonometry.
Francis.
I'm sure I'm not telling tales out of school. He at the end of December it just like snapped, and he got a plane to Austin. He's like, I can't be here anymore in London. Like I got to get the f out of here. And also, I'm sure the weather doesn't help either. I'd like to hear your perspective. So it's quite international. You grew up in Singapore, spent a lot of time in different countries. What's the climate like in the UK right now? Is it as bad as we're perceiving here on this side of the pond in terms of free speech?
Yes. I mean, it is. It is very bleak. I had this kind of moment when Winston said to me, I was making something in the kitchen, and he said to me, I just want you to know that there should be a protocol, and I want you to follow it." I was like, "What? Stop what you're doing and listen to me." And I thought, okay, that's very serious if he's asking me to stop.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, if the doorbell rings and look through the peephole, if it's a police officer with the yellow vest and everything, I want you to start recording no matter what. They're probably going to come, and it just won't be surprising, but you need to know that this is
Holy
what you
crap.
should." So he had that conversation. It's like the talk, and it reminded me, as you know, my co-founder is from Iraq, and he told me when he was growing up under Saddam's Iraq that he had his parents also had the version of the talk, and the talk in Iraq back then was in every household you would hang Saddam's picture, and if you've had frank conversations about politics in your household, as he had, his dad was very liberal, um, then when his best friend or his neighbor came over to the house to hang the picture back, and not tell them anything about the conversations they had, because you can't even trust your neighbor, you can't even trust your dad's best friend. So that's the kind of thing that kind of struck me when he said that. I said, "Winston, do you realize how weird this conversation is? Like you just told me a protocol to basically, like, this is the programming, get ready to record because this might actually happen. A police officer might actually ring the doorbell, come to the house, and I'm sure you saw that video. It
Yes, of
I
course. Yes.
can't
But
it
for people who don't understand what Melissa's referencing, there's a video, and I talked about this, on I think on trigonometry, where the guy's got his camera, he's sitting on his couch. This lady cop with the yellow vest is like, "Okay, you're being arrested for," I think it was a Facebook post, and he
yeah.
goes, "Hold on," I can't do his accent; it's really thick, very British, like low class, and not in a condescending way, but like he clearly doesn't come from money, and he's like, "You're telling me that you're here to arrest me because of Facebook post?" And she goes, and she's like, "Yes." And one would think, this clip went very wide. This would be a moment where people are like, okay, where did we take this turn?
Mhm.
Because, okay, even if had good intentions, whatever, we're ending up at this place. This is crazy. We got to take a step back. And there was none of that. It was just doubling down. And this was not just a labor thing. This was happening under the Tories. Let's that be clear to everyone.
Since 2014, when that there was this law about this idea about non-crime hate incidents, right?
Right.
And so moving to the UK, as I mean, I'm a hater. I'm a walking non-crime hate incident. Every morning I wake up, I choose hate. So moving here feels like a big risk, and just the biggest irony, because one of the things I left Singapore for quite specifically was I didn't like growing up or working in a place where you just don't have freedom of speech. The way it rewires the brain, the way it kind of spits out this very conformist culture. If you're kind of a edgelord, natural contrarian, this is not a place where you'll feel comfortable. It's always like there's just this weight hanging over your
Yeah.
shoulders.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you see that, I'm sure, you know, y on your recent trip to Japan, you kind of see a little bit what it's like to be in a very conformist society. Um, People kind of walk around with that, no inner monologue, and it's just not vibrant. It's not vibrant in terms
Right.
of being able to have conversations that are you really feel, comfortable in. So to move from a place like that, where, by the way, in Singapore, I did actually handle a free speech case where somebody was very young YouTuber who turned out to be a total terrible person, but that's another thing altogether.
Don't
He was
Google it, people. You don't want to know.
I know. But at 16 years old, he was arrested for making a YouTube video.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing that really bothers me. It's that, in America, you just don't have to worry about anything. There is no situation, even if somebody. You imagine telling an American police officer, "Go to this person's house and arrest them for this tweet." I mean, I don't even think the officer would comply in America. It's just
I mean, they wouldn't arrest you for shooting up a school at that moment.
right. And so to go from a place where I was very conscious about what I was saying all the time, especially publicly in Singapore, because precisely that you could have at any moment. I think the if 4 or 5 people lodge police reports about a Facebook post, um, you can actually get a visit from the police officer in Singapore. We also have this law that was passed in Singapore in 2019 called the Prevention of Falsehoods and Online Misinformation Act, called POFMA. And that is an act that essentially says that the authorities can actually POFMA your social media posts, and once it triggers that, the government can actually force you to either retract, edit it, make an apology, and if you don't do that, you can actually get fined or potentially go to jail. So this is over speech that the government decides is false, or is online misinformation, that very broad term. And that's the kind of climate I left, right?
Yeah.
And by the
Yeah.
way, I'm critical about Singapore's free speech situation, but on the other hand, obviously, it's quite a success in so many other ways, and there are some things about the way Singapore manages a multicultural society that I think has some lessons for the West to learn, especially, after the last 8 years of chaos and disorder in the West. So I'll say that.
No, so the point is, so he gave you this talk, and so it is getting worse. Like the thing that Francis told me, the epiphany he had is the people want this. It's not like this is some kind of weird minor fringe that's being imposed. There's a lot of people who are happy that this is happening. Like in America, like the thing that and I'm sure you and most people watching this right now, if you took us to 2019 and you asked us how Americans, specifically Americans, would have acted under a hypothetical COVID situation, what we would have said was be completely wrong. I think we were all surprised by how quick people were to bend the knee, how desperate they were to get people fired or kicked out of restaurants. This was a side of Americanism that we would have thought, okay, it's Karen, it's the small, crazy neurotic minority, maybe in college towns, or it was pervasive. You saw it in all the states. Some even in the dark red states, there's enough of it that it was surprising. The fact that gyms were being closed, and the fact, here's the thing that surprises me the most to this day: the fact that grandparents were murdered by these governors, the fact that you couldn't have funerals, the fact that you couldn't see dying people in the hospital, and no one went Guy Fawkes, to use a euphemism. That's shocking to me. I would have thought this is going to be the tipping point where someone's going to really get very violent, and they didn't. And I think some very bad people, got some very useful information about that.
Yeah, no, I agree. But one of my favorite stories from that COVID era was I was living in New York at the time, when Bill De Blasio put out a hotline saying, if you see or your neighbors violating the 6 feet, social distancing protocol, please call this number, take a picture, basically snitch on your
Yeah,
fellow
yeah.
countrymen if they're not wearing a mask or anything. And people just New Yorkers were sending dick pics into that hotline,
Oh,
and
were
I
they?
was
Oh, yeah, that's right. I
very
forgot about that. That was so great. Yeah.
very proud. I was like, "Yes, be ungovernable. This is exactly the spirit. Like, we are not going to snitch on our neighbors. I don't want to live in a place where people are snitchy." And I think, in the UK, what's a bit shocking about this is that I thought this is the country that produced Monty Python. This is the country that I thought subversive humor is almost baked in. Um, and over the course of, I don't know, the last year or so, I've come to realize that I don't see that spirit
Right.
in the average Brit anymore. It's culturally, Britain also has this kind of, Francis talks about it all the time. This like tall poppy syndrome, where
Yeah.
people are not exactly. There's no idea that all a rising tide lifts all boats. They don't. American culture is very superlative in so many ways. People are always, if you ask someone, an American, how was your day? It's awesome. It's epic. It's always kind of extreme. Brits are always very measured. They could have a situation where the house is on fire, and yet they would say, "Oh, we're in a bit of a pickle." So it's such a different culture, and they kind of are very mistrustful over this, and that kind of American optimism and attitude. And when I first moved here, remember I had a lot of I just love cowboy stuff. Okay, so I like cowboy hats and things like that. And Winston said to me, "Don't wear this stuff outside because like people are just gonna like look at you funny, right?" But in America, you can be weird. In the UK, if you're weird, there is this sense of like, very what Obama described also, being in the black community. It's like you get kind of pulled down. Anyone trying to escape, like, who do you think you are? You should know your station in life. Part of it is so entrenched in British culture for obvious reasons, right? Because this is a very, far more classist society in the sense of that you have these social strata that are quite entrenched versus the American frontier culture of you can be anything you want. It's like self actualization on steroids. And that manifests in the reaction to authority, I think, in very different ways.
Folks, dressing up during the winter is tricky for guys. A hoodie makes you look like you're running late for college finals. A blazer makes it look like you're going to a funeral. Bird dogs, classic quarter zips are perfect if you're looking for something in between. So if you're golfing, going on a first date, bird dogs, quarter zips are your new go-to. Now, let's talk about the pants. We all know wearing nice pants is the worst. When I record the show, I'm not wearing pants at all. Bird dog stretch khakis actually look like you're dressing up, but they have the stretch and flexibility that you need. Other athleisure pants look shiny and too casual to wear into the office, but with Bird dog stretch khakis, you could finally have comfort and style while you're at work. For a limited time only, our listeners are getting a free hat with any order when you use code Malice at birddogs.com. You get their best-selling hat completely free when you use code Malice at birddogs.com. And when they tell you in the office, hey, I like your hat, you tell them it's what's under the hat that counts. Despite their name, Bird Dog stretch khakis come in way more colors than just khaki. They've got graphite gray, hunter green. You're going to find the right color for you. No more rolling up your pants because you get to pick the waist and the length size. And whatever Bird Dog's clothing item you choose, it's going to be surprisingly comfortable. For a limited time, our listeners are getting a free hat when you use code Malice at birddogs.com. That's birddogs.com. So head on over there and you'll be thanking me. Let's get back to the show. Can you discuss for people to know your organization, the work it does, which I think is superb? Can you give them a brief description of what the kind of work you guys do?
So I started an organization with Faisal, a very good friend of mine from Iraq. You should have him on. He's actually really funny and self-deprecating, and he makes a lot of terrorist jokes, self-deprecating terrorist jokes. So I know he's your type of person.
But okay,
Um,
let me interrupt this. I'll tell you something funny, and everyone in the audience. Every so often, I'll think of a tweet and I'll schedule it, and then I'll forget about it, and then it pops up. So for 9/11, I've scheduled a tweet of that lady burning the New York City subway and the cop just walking by,
Oh my god.
and it says, "I'm gonna tell my kids this is Building 7."
Oh my
And I
god.
forgot I posted that, then I saw it was in my scheduled tweets. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, that's pretty funny."
That's hilarious. Okay. Yeah, you guys will get along.
Yeah.
Um,
I met him. We did get along.
oh, you did? Okay.
Yeah, in New York.
We it started out with like one of the things that was lacking in the Arab world, especially in Arabic language, was just access to a lot of books that you and I can read. Things like books about philosophy, science, especially kind of atheist books. And we happen to be friends with people like Sam Harris, Steven Pinker. Like at that time, new atheism was such a big deal, and a lot of these books were written about challenging religion, religious mindset, and doctrines. So we we asked them, there's not much profit to be made in the uh, if you publish a book in Arabic compared to English. And so many of these authors were just like, well, you can just have the rights. And so we would actually translate these books. That's what our foundation started out doing, was translating a lot of these like End of Faith, Richard Dawkins books, Christopher Hitchens, and digitize them. So we have an e-library. You can actually see the website. It's called Beit al Hikmah, after the House of Wisdom, which was a library that was, I think it was in Babylon at the time, and it was sacked by the Mongols when Iraq was kind of the center of the Islamic Golden Age. And we just created a library that you can download, even books by like David Deutsch about science books from the author from Oxford. So it we kind of branched out eventually. We realized, like, okay, how about Wikipedia? 17% at the time when we first started, 17% of Wikipedia articles were of English Wikipedia articles were non-Arabic. So if you went to the website Wikipedia and you looked up Albert Einstein, it didn't exist for obvious
Oh,
reasons.
wow.
And so if you're an Arabic,
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm being stupid. Why is it obvious reasons?
he's Jewish.
Wait, but I mean, sure, Einstein is Jewish, but you're saying the Arabic world, what they pretend doesn't exist?
Okay, so Wikipedia is a volunteer project. So
Sure.
part of it just wasn't the focus of the
Okay, okay.
right. I'm not saying it's like some grand conspiracy or anything. It's not. But there were a lot of just pages that science pages, even people. Ayn Rand. We were the ones that created the page for Ayn Rand. There's this guy that works with us, Ahmed. He started. He's from Iraq, and he started a page called I Believe in Science, and it got a lot of followers. And so, we hired him and his team to just translate a bunch of these Wikipedia articles. Of course, now that's kind of unnecessary.
Sure.
The whole goal was to put ourselves out of work, in the sense that, like, if you translate, hundreds and hundreds and thousands of words, at some point AI just takes over, because you've
Okay.
already trained it can just be done um, automatically now. And that's actually, I think now the output is like 25% of, so we've increased from 17% to 25% of English Wikipedia now in Arabic. um but then Faisal was like, okay, so this is like idea space. Like, you've kind of given people videos. We've made videos about, in Arabic, about Holocaust education, for example. Not how to do it. I meant, this is the history, and that you might have missed out in your education. So we branched out from not just actual books, but also video, podcasts, things like that. So it's a whole like media empire now, um, because you got to meet the young people where they are, and beyond ideas, it's like, okay, so you've given people access to ideas about classical liberalism, about atheism, about all these other um, ideas that I guess like people don't have access to normally. And how do they? But how do they? How can you impact their lives a little bit more on the action level? And so we started it's kind of, we call it the innovation hub. And what it is, it's like modeled after Tyler Cohen's Emergent Ventures, where you have entrepreneurs, sometimes social entrepreneurs from around the world, just applying for small grants to get certain projects off the ground. And in a place where places like Syria, Iraq, Lebanon, Egypt, the government is a huge, I think 40% of adults work for the government or something like that. And so when you graduate from university, there's no startup scene, there's
Right.
no venture capital scene. And so it's very hard to entice people to start their own businesses. And so we started doing this innovation hub where we would actually fund. So it could not necessarily business, right? Because if that was the case, it was going to turn a profit, then you could just apply for some sort of bank loan to start a business. But we're talking about things like there's a young kid that wants to, I don't know, start a podcast about Chinese influence in the Middle East, and that would have some sort of startup cost, maybe $2,000, not much, but it goes a very long way
Yeah.
in that. And so yeah, we started doing things like that as well with giving grants away, small grants to
I
startups.
imagine it's I remember vividly when I was in high school and I found Rush Limbaugh. And it was an opportunity for me to really screw with people, not even because necessarily because I bought into what he was saying, but just putting the framework that he put out, in, like, New York City really made people lose their minds, and it was very, very fun and very, very funny, right? I imagine for young Arabic and Persian kids, high school in their 20s, coming upon these ideas, which to us and people listening to this are just second nature. Like Einstein's hardly some kind of hipster marginal figure, but it must be. And for anyone, when you encounter this whole like world, that mug.
Oh,
I can't believe that's your mug.
yeah, it is. I love it. It's
You're
hilarious.
the worst. Um, Uh, I imagine it must be really kind of exciting. It's like when you find this band that no one's heard of, or it attracts a certain kind of mindset where you're like, I have this like secret information, and now I feel kind of like I don't know, better than other people, but certainly special. And those are the kind of people who do move cultures.
Exactly. It's edgy and it kind of codes very differently because if you think about someone like Faisal was born in 1991. He grew up in first Gulf. He experienced, a bit of Saddam's rule. So first Gulf War, um, and then U.S. invasion, U.S. occupation, and then his whole homeland was plunged into uh, ISIS territory and extremism and jihad, and so they've almost tried almost every bad idea,
Yeah.
and what's left? In actually 2019, there were pro-democracy protests in Iraq, which was quite conveniently squashed by COVID. A lot of people kind of the COVID years are such a wipeout, right? Because there were a lot of things happening in the world that COVID kind of,
Yeah.
you know, just put a stop to quite abruptly. And one of them was a a lot of these pro-democracy protests that were happening in various parts of the Middle East as well.
Are you seeing any places in the world where things are improving in terms of free speech and ideas?
Actually, yes. I would say the Middle East now is. I mean, look at Saudi Arabia. The changes you've seen in the Gulf states, quite remarkable. They've made a huge play to become such a more open society, and I know the bar was quite low, but women can drive.
Well,
Women,
they're allowed to drive.
they're allowed to drive. They abolished the guardian
Doesn't
system.
mean they can. They are allowed to.
That's correct. As a Asian woman, it's doubly. Yep, I understand that. Um, and they've now invited big sporting companies to kind of collaborate with Saudi Arabia. You got the golf tournament there, I think a version of the UFC now in Saudi Arabia. Cristiano Ronaldo moved there to play for a Saudi team, and so you see Saudi kind of on this world stage now trying to embrace this openness and liberalism. And as that happens, The End of Faith by Sam Harris was a book that we were able to, that was actually requested at the Riyadh Book Fair. So we kind of have a pulse of what's going on based on books that are not, that are problematic, that a country, for example, wouldn't want to have. Like, for example, in Kuwait, the book The Little Mermaid is actually banned. And the reason why that's banned is because the little in that story, it is actually about defying your parents, right? Like she
Oh,
defied her
okay. Yeah.
trying, and so it's considered a bad book. Um,
Huh.
and
Okay.
whenever a country kind of, and we can tell because when we submit our books for book fairs, we can it's again, it's anecdotal, but maybe 4 years ago a certain book would not be wanted, and we would be actively told, please, like Salman Rushdie's book, for example,
Right, of course.
um, that year that he got stabbed in the eye, um, we actually, just it got sensitive, and so some of the countries didn't want that book there because there was just too much
Sure.
heightened focus on him, and so you can kind of tell what's happening on the ground. And we've seen a lot of changes in the Gulf states, the UAE. Um, and it's reflected also in there's this global push to have, like, say, like the Doha debates, right? So they're now inviting what would be controversial speakers, sometimes authors, to come debate two positions. It's held in these auditoriums in the Middle East, and in some ways, as you probably know too, that there's some things we can't really, even though in the US you have the First Amendment, there are some topics that are very controversial to discuss publicly in the US that may not be so in China, right?
Sure.
And so even though we know, yes, China's a place where there's no free speech, but you try talking about race and IQ in China
Right.
versus race and IQ in the US publicly. It really this, like, bottom up censorship versus top down censorship. In some ways, the bottom up censorship, right, which is what we have in the US from cancel culture and just kind of mob driven tactics, it your day to day experience of that is actually probably more anxiety inducing because the winds change. And so 5 years ago, it was problematic to say that there were two genders. But now in Trump's America, it's back. Like we have two genders again. So
There are two genders, right and wrong.
and women are property. Um, yeah. So the experience day to day of free speech laws is not, it doesn't necessarily correlate with this top down censorship and the
Yeah.
experience of it necessarily. But I guess back to the UK.
But just before you go on, this is why I hate the term free speech and I don't use it. I'm using it in this context because free speech, and I never say I'm for free speech because it means several different things to different people and they try to dance in between. In the one hand, it means governments banning things. On the other hand, it means things that are cultural taboos. And there are lots of taboos that I think are completely ridiculous. And there's lots of taboos that I'm very much in favor for. Like I'm not in favor of sexuality around children. And people will say, well, that's not free speech. Well, for some people it is. So this is why that term is not useful because people use it to define what is quote unquote obvious to them. But what's obvious to you is not going to be obvious to somebody else.
Yes, and actually, since October 7th, there was a lot of pushback on a lot of the people that you and I hang around with in media circles. Oh, I thought you were for free speech, especially when there were these campus protests that started erupting, and
Right.
they were pushing for the authorities, for campus authorities to actually do something, do more. Like, oh, I thought you were for free speech, and Eric Weinstein has he told me once that, like, you got to be very careful with these phrases for specifically the reason that you cited. And so he's like, free speech is adaptive in some ways, but it's also maladaptive in many other ways. And the problem with saying you're a free speech absolutist is that, firstly, that's not true.
Right.
That's no one actually is a free speech absolutist. And I learned that very early, obviously, because campaigning for somebody's right to free speech, I raised that banner, and then it turns out that this young YouTuber who got political asylum in the U.S. then gets caught promoting pedophilia, and I'm now advocating for his arrest and deportment to Singapore. He actually, for him, the line actually moved from speech to action. He was actually grooming a 14-year-old, and so that was like the first lesson I got in terms
Right.
of, okay, you have to be very careful. Like, what exactly did you mean by? And I had said on camera so many times I was a free speech absolutist. Turns out, no, I wasn't.
I'm also, to Eric's point, I'm in favor of violence against college students at any opportunity. So I think cracking a few heads is going to be a good thing, I think, to put them in their stupid
I'm
place.
pro bully. We need actually we need a
Folks, January is all about fresh starts. It's a great time to swap out that skincare product that's been weighing your skin down in favor of a regimen that's scientifically proven to transform your skin at the cellular level, something that today's sponsor, OneSkin, knows all about. They send me their box, and I've started using it after the shower on my face and under my eyes. It's always fun to have these little rituals to make yourself feel better. Their products are powered by OS01, which is a proprietary peptide that the four founders developed after testing over 900 other peptides. And it's scientifically proven to switch off the aging, dysfunctional cells that cause lines, wrinkles, and thinning skin. Not only that, but OneSkin's products are packed with nourishing ingredients that naturally boost collagen, reduce inflammation, and protect skin from environmental stressors while being free of unnecessary irritants like sulfates and fragrance. The thing that's different about OneSkin is that they believe the purpose of skincare is not just to improve how you look, but to optimize your skin's biology at the cellular level so it's more resilient to the aging process. So, detox your routine, improve your skin health, look your best. Head over oneskin.co and use code MALICE at checkout for an exclusive 15% off your first purchase. Make 2025 the year you invest in habits that keep you and your skin healthier at the cellular level. Founded and led by an all-woman team of skin longevity scientists, OneSkin is redefining the aging process with a proprietary OS01 peptide, the first ingredient proven to help skin look, feel, and behave like it's its younger self. Get 15% off code MALICE at oneskin.co. That's 15% off oneskin.co with code MALICE. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard from them. Support our show. Tell them we sent you. Invest in the health and longevity of your skin with OneSkin. Your future self will thank you. You're welcome. And yes, I said transform. Let's get back to the show. That's interesting because I spent some time. I spoke at Hans Hermann Hoppe's Property and Freedom Society, and that's in Bodrum, Turkey. And what people don't appreciate, I think, is a lot of these cultures where they have like free speech restrictions. It's just like 2 or 3 rules, and they're pretty clear. And if you avoid these topics, you pretty much can do whatever you want. And
Yeah.
now sometimes these topics can be broad. It could be just don't talk about politics, and for Americans, that's like impossible. But the problem is in some countries it's very ambiguous and it changes overnight. But again, in some of these countries, just like these are the rules. Just don't, and if you follow it, you actually are going to be fine.
Yeah, exactly. And so I have friends who are, in the tech world, and they tell me that in some ways, in places like Saudi Arabia and UAE, where the out of bounds markers for speech is very defined. You just don't criticize, Islam, Prophet Muhammad, or the government. That was it. And you can actually have very broad, as you experience it, conversations. And in some ways, um, it's ironically a bit more liberating because the speech codes are actually defined. You don't feel like the rules of the game can change on you, and then all of a sudden you're caught out, right? And in the West also, like there are things you can be penalized for because the boundaries shifted for something you said 10 years ago. As you know, our your friend too, Joe, was caught out with this deceptively edited video about him using the N-word when actually he was actually referring to other people using the
Well,
N-word.
no, you're not right. No. It wasn't deceptively edited at all. It was a
That was
compilation of all the times he's used it, and it wasn't always referenced. He was using it. He wasn't using it in a negative way, but he was saying like, "Oh, this word," because 2 of my episodes got pulled from Spotify because the word was used. Because he has a joke about this in his act. He's like, so then someone put together a compilation, and I sit home and I'm watching it. I'm like, dude, stop! And I'm yelling, stop saying it. Then I look, Jesus Christ, there's 4 minutes left. What the fuck's wrong with me? So it was a compilation. But listen, if
I
you talk
thought
for
he
3
was
hours a
what I
day
was
for 10
referring to.
years, no, he
But
wasn't always referring to it. He
okay,
wasn't using it as a slur in the sense of like,
exactly.
oh, this person is that, but he was referencing the word. Well, it's like the guy from KFC, I think it was, or one of them, Papa John's, was saying the word midget is like saying that word for black people. So don't do it. And then he got fired. He's like, but I was saying it's a bad thing. I wasn't praising. Nope, you said. But
Exactly. Yeah.
I think that ship has sailed.
What, we can say it now?
We can't say that word, but that like concept of if someone's referring to it in a context of this is really bad, they might get a reprimand. Their life's not going to be ruined. Now it's not a win,
May
but it's a
wants
step
to
in the
be
right
the
direction.
right person to test that, right? Because yeah, I mean, I know someone actually got fired from a Netflix executive meeting for even saying that word is bad. And you remember Donald McNeil from the New York Times? He was the what spent 30 years reporting on pandemics for the New York Times. Gets fired during a pandemic for a story that happened 10 years ago, where he actually used the N word, but not calling somebody that, just referencing the word. So I don't know if I want to be the first person to test that, but
Sure,
I
sure. You're gonna have that yellow vest at your door, and that is the like an extreme, the most extreme in America, at least. Um, but I think that the other thing that's to your point, I think in America, and maybe in England as well, I can't speak on that. There really is this vision of the Arab world being a monolith, and it's so many countries and so many cultures. And by the way, if you, I've said this before, if you have a friend who's Persian, you try telling them they're Arab, see what's going to happen to you because
oh
I know it's not going to end well. I assure you.
my
Persia,
yeah.
the Muslim world has had a long history of being these kind of liberal city stopping points on the Silk Road, where people from all sorts of cultures came together. And cities and openness go hand in hand because you're going to have this diversity of population. I don't mean diversity in the leftist sense of there's a black guy in the room. I mean like people from all over, like New York. You have to have some sense of liberalism because no matter where you come from, you have to feel like you can be somewhat safe there. That's gone out the window in recent years, but that was historically the vision of cities. I think in some ways the internet has made cities outdated and anachronism because you don't need to go to New York to have this diversity of conversation. You could have it on Twitter or somewhere else.
Yep. Yeah. You can live in the country now and have just as stimulating a conversation. You don't need to actually physically be in this confluence of, and I think that was, I mean, during COVID, when people moved out, they realized that. And so the cities have fundamentally changed as well.
Yeah, and I don't see how it's gonna turn around. So, are you living like Winston's pretty outspoken with his videos? Are you like living in fear? Of that yellow vest at the door?
Yeah. I when I brought this up, he mentioned to me that, on the one hand, it's something to be concerned about, but on the other, if you notice also, the people who the police actually do go after are not really high profile, privileged people.
Yet,
The one time they did, which was they went after Allison Pearson, an officer visited her house. She's a Telegraph journalist, and she got a visit from a police officer at 10 a.m. in the morning. And she was told that she was being logged for essentially a non-crime hate incident for something, and they wouldn't even tell her what it was, which is, again, what kind of kangaroo court is this? Um,
and
and
what's the point of a visit, right? Other than intimidation, you could send someone a
exactly,
letter. By the way, just so you know, this happened. Like when you get a ticket, they don't have to show up at your door.
no, exactly. And this became a storm, a media storm, and there was a lot of discussion. And eventually, the police had to announce, "Okay, we're going to drop everything. This is ridiculous." But that is the point, though, because
Yeah.
if you are high profile, you can ratchet up a lot of outrage about something like that and turn it into a scandal. And the police here seem to uh, they're they're cowards. So I do think that he's protected in some way because, if he actually does get arrested for something like that, it will make him a martyr for the cause, and it will actually, just draw way too much attention. And again, who suffers? It's going to be your average, someone working in retail, working class person, and they're always the one that bear the brunt of these terrible policies. And in part, like, given the issues that are happening here in the UK now with the grooming gang scandal, or the uncontrolled immigration scandals, like, just discussing this is could be said to be racist. I mean, this is the tactic that the left has applied on discourse in the United States for the last decade. It was basically putting boundaries around entire swaths of conversation topics and saying you can't go there because it is alt right, it is, far right, white supremacists, you name it. They've used the most extreme words to just tar
Nazi,
these topics as unsayable, and that's happening here too. And that is the goal, actually. That's why they do it.
of course,
Um,
and it's effective often.
Oh, very effective. No, it's the Islamophobia playbook, right? Like, suddenly a word was invented to protect a class ideas, essentially, not people, not anti-Muslim bigotry. It was Islamophobia, and in some ways, I think people see that this is such a useful tactic. If you want to shut down conversation,
Yeah.
you just say that this is the person who's talking is being a bigot, and I'm facing that with just criticizing the TikTok decision, right? Because if you the same playbook, you can see the conversation surrounding, say, COVID at the beginning was that, and questioning where the virus came from was being racist, for example.
Right.
Like that is such an effect, and people fall for it. And the the idea that like the
Wait, let me
virus,
say one more thing. It's the one time that anti-Asian racism was a concern. Like
yeah,
any other time you're anti-Asian, if they're getting discriminated against in colleges, all these other things, who cares, you know?
exactly.
But this is the one time, "Oh, now I care that people are being racist against Asians." The one time.
No, but it was completely astroturf. That
Of
whole
course it was. I'm just saying it was
movement.
so disingenuous, right?
Nobody hated Asians. And in fact, like a lot of the crime that you saw, in these videos of Asians getting punched on the streets, robbed, these were older, helpless
Yes,
um, aunties who live in Chinatown, and they were being robbed most of the time. They were being attacked, and it wasn't Trump voters. So the
right.
attempt to link Trump's rhetoric about the China virus to the violence that Asians were facing on the streets just didn't hold water if you actually looked at it. But the media kept repeating this narrative.
Of
And so,
course.
my cynical take was just that this is an attempt to drive the Asian American voting bloc into the progressive fold.
Of
Because if
course.
you think that they're under attack racially, or under racial attacks, then they tend to vote left. They want to vote for the
But
Democrat.
also, Melissa, just this whole idea of AAPI, that, like, you go to Asia and you tell someone from India that they're the same as someone from the Philippines, and they're the same as someone from Japan, like, you're like a crazy person, but, like, they're trying to make that a thing.
Yeah, exactly. The monolith. It's a census category that makes less sense than Hispanic.
Right,
At least Hispanics have a common language, except Brazil. Asians don't even have that, and
right.
it makes we fight more among each other than anyone can ever imagine. I mean, Russell Peters had this great bit where he says, like, he's like talking to his audience, and he says, you know, all of us brown people, we convince white people that they were the most racist. It's like, and all of you know that's a scam, and it's true. I mean, when I got into an Uber with my mom once, and the driver said to me like, "Oh, you are from Thailand?" My mother's face just went like black. She was like, "Thailand?" She's like, "I told you." She turned to me and she was like, "I told you, you are too dark." Because like I was so dark that I appeared to be a jungle Asian. That's that was offensive to her. It's like my Chinese girl is, being mischaracterized as a jungle Asian.
You
So
you were like Snooki.
yeah, yeah, that because there's hierarchies within it, and
Of
if
course.
you hang around with Indians, with Japanese, everyone knows that.
Yeah. So speaking of racism, my dear Melissa, you just recently got into some heat with the tankies on Twitter.
Yeah, I
Can
did.
you tell people about that?
So, oh man, I always say that you can judge a movement by how frenzied the reaction you get. And so I always used to tell my friends who, like people like Abigail Schreier, Colin Wright, whose main topics, the focus of their work has been pushing back on gender ideology.
Right.
Um, the amount of vitriol they get, the tenor of it, the amplitude of it is so scary. It rises to the level of death threats.
Well,
And
I don't know what Colin's work, but Abigail's work, people don't understand this. You know, she's the one talking about social contagion with trans kids, especially F to M, which was something that was not a thing until 5 minutes ago. But you're dealing with a population that's literally 100% mentally ill. So, you can't really be that much surprised where the response is going to be very heavily crazy.
yeah, there's an emotional dysregulation in the
Yes,
response. Hysterical, histrionic. J.K. Rowling gets that a lot, and I think
I
you
love
can
her so
judge the
much.
movement based on just how crazy people are in service of protecting that. And if you've ever come into the crosshair of tankies, they get really nasty. And especially, I mean, I don't know if your audience knows this, but this actually happened to Tony Hinchcliffe when he was canceled in 2021.
Oh, I didn't know this. Okay, what about it?
So the cancellation attempt was a leaked video that he actually did. The only time he actually discussed this publicly was when he told Trigonometry the exclusive story about what happened. He went on Twitter one day and he saw this leaked video from a night before. There was a Chinese comic, Peng Dang or something, and he leaked this video of just a clip of Tony using some slurs, right? Like he uses some Asian slurs, and he was hosting a comedy night. I think it was in Austin, and this Asian comic had been slagging off white people during his whole bit, and he like was kind of dilly dallying, and the roast comic roasted the Asian comic, and this clipped video goes viral.
Melissa, why didn't you say he roasted him like a Peking duck? That was such an opportunity that you missed.
Because I actually don't like Peking. I actually don't like Chinese food. Sorry. Um, I just never think of Chinese food. Um, and and so this one goes viral, and he realizes at some point that the given the timing of how this clip gets released, you should go see the episode. By the way, it's Tony Hinchcliffe on Trigonometry. He actually describes it. It was actually a very coordinated campaign by
Yeah.
random Chinese accounts.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
originate and the time zone difference. He kind of calculated. He was like, "Okay, this is not organic."
Right.
And it becomes the number one news all over. Tony Hinchcliffe uses and this is part of this period of time post pandemic when anti-Asian sensitivities are at its highest, and the media and NGOs have been drumming up this idea of anti-Asian hate being the worst a pandemic worse than COVID.
Right.
So he gets he actually lies low for a few days, and that was kind of the nadir of his career. Actually, that kind of thing uh, happens to anyone that crosses their line. The same thing happened to Shane Gillis with the neuters. You remember that? He was
No.
accused also of anti. That the
Oh,
reason
that's
why,
with China Live, you mean?
yeah,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
it was specifically for a podcast that he did years and years
Yeah,
ago where
yeah,
he
right.
neuter like that. And then you remember Colbert got in trouble for this bit that he did, like, I got to be sent to the Ching Chong Ding Dong school of cultural sensitivity. So there's been a string of these kind of incidents where comics get
Well, I mean, good luck getting in there. They're very competitive.
I know, uh, affirmative action for that. And so it was a string of these incidents where comics just couldn't. Asians became so sensitive about the race issue, and I was convinced that this is not organic.
Right.
It was just an astroturf movement,
With too much MSG.
and MSG sucks.
It's not
Um,
organic.
yeah, it's not. So what happened to me was recently I was tweeting about the TikTok ban, and I'm actually in favor of it. Um, and
But I thought you're a free speech absolutist.
exactly. Okay, which by the way is another way that they've been trying to make this issue about First Amendment issue. It is not a First Amendment issue. This is about an issue about foreign ownership and who can actually own media in America. So the stories that came out as this ban was going into effect on January 19th was that there was a new app on the scene called Red Note, and a lot of the TikTok refugees. Can you imagine? They're using the word refugees. Like, tell that to Youngmi Park's face. Like, TikTok refugees. We're going over to Red Note, which, by the way, is just the English name. The actual Chinese name is called Xiaohongshu, which means literally little red book.
Oh, wow.
And
So, like now, okay, yeah,
exactly. And China's very symbolic culture, so I don't
of
think this
course.
is a coincidence. Um, so somebody tweeted Xiaohongshu. Looks like everyone's moving on to Xiaohongshu, and I just replied to this tweet. So bear in mind, this is not on my timeline. I replied to that tweet and I said, "Oh boy, what is this? Is it another Ching Chong spyware app?" That was it. That's one line I tweeted. And this tweet goes viral. I think there's like millions of views now on that tweet. And
I
the
love you so
hate
much.
mail,
I love you so much. I wish you I hope you feel it across the pond how much love I have for you.
that's because you love casual racism. It's what we
And
bond over,
and non-casual.
and formal. Um,
Formal. Like that, like with Polya, you want the high culture and you want the low culture. You want it all the flavors.
all the whole spectrum
Yeah,
of racism. And so I started getting hate mail for this, and it got to the point where you know there are foreign journalists, they're really just activists who are essentially paid to propagate Chinese propaganda. And there was a New Zealand journalist who is based in China, leftist, obviously
right.
Marxist, and he now makes a video investigating me for this, not just my tweet, but like going back to my all my anti-Asian stances, including saying that I downplayed the anti-Asian hate during COVID, which I did because it wasn't real. So he had to read with a straight face. And Melissa, and I read her tweet. Ching Chong. I replied to. I had another tweet that replied to Konstantin Kisin. He went after Brianna Joy Gray and called her DEI Barbie when they had a spat.
Okay.
Um, she is a journalist, former journalist that left the Hill over her anti-Semitic comments. And in their spat, Konstantin had said called her DEI Barbie.
Okay.
And so I replied to that tweet saying, "I'm Ching Chong Barbie." So this guy has to now, he obviously Googled my handle and Googled Ching Chong and found I use this word very often, and has to read this with a straight face. How dare she? How dare she? Self-loathing, Chinese journalist who hates her skin and her ancestors so
Oh,
much.
please.
And they just don't. That's the thing about a lot of these cultures. Peter Thiel has this quote, which I didn't understand at the beginning, but now I do. He said, China is such an autistic country. And I didn't really know what he meant then. But the more I experience, and I see how the Chinese are actually playing their propaganda games, the more I understand exactly what he means. They cannot operate at this higher plane level. Everything is just taken face value. And you can this idea that like maybe you can reclaim words that don't, you can choose for it to not mean anything. And we've seen that so many times, like the gays reclaim queer. Now we can use gay as an insult again. Yay, I'm so happy. Did the reclaim it? No, I think you actually reclaimed the for America.
Yes, I did.
But we've we've reclaimed so many words and we've stripped them of power, and they don't see that as a power move. I mean, you have the cynical ones who are just exploiting that. They just want to pin a racial slur on you. That's just for their own purposes to win an argument. But the amount of people that go along with it, that never question, that just like, oh, she said, we're back there, with in America. If you notice though, this is gone. It's just not effective, right? Elon Musk was just accused of doing a Nazi salute, and half the internet's like,
Sorry,
yeah.
I was scrolling your timeline so I could find that tweet so I could, retweet you.
Oh,
If
you gotta just search the
I
Ching
got it.
Chong.
If you are not following this broad, you are missing out something
You're gonna get me in trouble.
fierce. Okay, done. Okay.
But what's instructive is looking at the comments in reply to that, and you will see what the attempt is, like how they're thinking about propaganda. And with this red note influx, a lot of videos then show up on Twitter, which again, this looks weird. Like, I'm sure growing up, you spent time and you're very familiar with Soviet propaganda as well.
Of
Like,
course.
really trigger your alarm bells. What's happening when you see these videos of young Americans like, oh, China's not so bad. Actually, they have free healthcare and they're crying over these things, and it's just like the the propaganda play here is so obvious.
Right, that's the thing. It's not sophisticated.
It's not. And in a way, it's okay if you're fooled by that. Almost like I that's on you, because how can you look at that and think like? this is in any way real, or that, like, the point is not that an individual life is better in China or better in the US. That's not the point. It's a total distraction from the actual issues at hand, and they know that. But it just tugs at heartstrings in such a way that is very, I don't know, it's cringe. It's very, very cringe.
Folks, you know I love sheath underwear. I've modeled for sheath underwear. I wear them literally every day. I'm wearing them right now as we record. 2025 is here, and they sent me a script, and I'm going to read the first part of it verbatim. I am happy talk about a favorite advertiser on the You're Welcome with Mike Malice. I am talking about sheath underwear. Every time you hear my voice, or if you were able to see my face, it would be obvious that I'm wearing a pair of my sheath boxer briefs. So even AI knows how great sheath is, because I'm assuming that's who wrote it, or an immigrant, which I am. But let's get serious, because it is by far the most comfortable underwear I've ever worn. There's a reason why I wear it every day, and that reason is sheath has two pouches attached to it. One for one part of your male anatomy, one for another part of your male anatomy. And it seems kind of weird, but then you try it on and you're like, oh, this is comfortable. It keeps me cool when it's hot. It keeps me snug. They've got a lot of cool patterns. I designed a couple of them, and it's something I am very proud to wear and promote, because they're a great company. Support the underwear that supports you, and that is Sheath Underwear. And here's the thing: use promo code Malice at sheathunderwear.com and you get 20% off. They've got shirts. I wear their shirts to the gym. They've got hoodies. I don't wear hoodies. I'm not Mark Zuckerberg 2022. I promise you, if you try it, you'll like it. I like it. I love it. In fact, I'm happy talk about a favorite advertiser. Go to sheathunderwear.com, use promo code Malice, get 20% off today. Let's get back to the show. I think I don't have a position on TikTok ban, because I haven't looked into it at all. I'm broadly, in favor of people can do what they want, but I mean, I don't know how much spyware there is. I'm not a fan of the CCP, to put it mildly. Um, Point being, though, with Trump in the White House, I
Yeah.
think he's clearly someone who's very suspicious of China and its antics, and propaganda, broadly speaking. So I think he'd be much more of a dupe, much less of a dupe for Chinese BS than Biden would have been, and Biden's people.
Generally, I agree, and also I think I was one of those people quite upset when Trump won in 2016, because I was a Jon Stewart watching, Obama loving, uh, c- center, yeah, um, and actually it was Trump's machinations on the trade war that red pilled me on Trump, because a lot of the actions that he had taken, he single-handedly changed America, what was a defining ethos of American foreign policy for like decades since
Yes.
Nixon, single-handedly. And I realized, like, oh, I think I've been duped by the media. And so by 2018, I was on Trump train. And mostly it was because of how he was dealing with China. Like, for the first time, a leader was speaking up about this. And at the time, also, the media was actually trying to paint him as some sort of, he was doing, anti-Asian hate. There was that kind of insinuation that he was being xenophobic, especially with the way they would zoom in on his lips as he said China, right? Like the Chinese caused climate change and things like that. And they would make a big deal out of these statements. Um, but after COVID, after 2020 hit, the whole country then was like, oh my gosh, Trump was right about
Yeah,
this.
yeah.
All of the things that they complained about, Biden rolled forward.
Yeah.
Every single tariff, his all the policies, the hawkish policies towards China, Biden did not change a single one. He was as America first as Trump was, but the media never covered him the same way, right? So I got red pilled on Trump's approach to China foreign policy, and the thing I do worry about him, though, is that you know he does like being popular,
Sure.
and this is such an easy way, being the savior of TikTok. 170 million Americans, mostly Gen Z, and he never had Gen Z on board with him.
Right.
Um, so this is kind of my worry, is that in a bid to, be the popular guy that comes in to save it, that he ends up giving too much. But again, with Trump, it's always like There's rhetoric, and then there's what he does.
Right.
There's you got to take that with a grain of salt.
And I'm not a Marco Rubio fan, to put it mildly, but if there's one thing I can rely on a Cuban to be good at, it's being anti-commie. So, like,
Yeah.
literally, that's the one issue where I'm like, you know what, Rubio, I haven't even looked into his record on commie stuff. I would bet I could take it to the bank better than certainly even most conservatives. He sees through the bullshit. I'm sure his family, what they went through. Once you go through that, you can't unring that bell. So that is so. In terms of China, that makes me very hopeful that he is not going to be wanting to be friends necessarily with the Chinese in the way that Trump might be. He's like, oh, I know these people, the devil, and maybe I have to work with them, but I'm not under any misconceptions that they're just like us, but they just use chopsticks instead of forks.
Actually, I was going to ask you that because you know, I know that you care a lot about decentralizing power in general.
Sure.
Sorry, because how does one have a cohesive anti-commie foreign policy in a decentralized way? Like
Well,
how
sure. I'll tell you easily. One of the reasons we don't have that right now is because of the corporate press and so much of media is centralized, and because so much there's very little anti-Chinese rhetoric in corporate media circles. And it's just kind of taken as a given that, they've got their quirks, we've got our quirks, but it's basically the same when push comes to shove. If there was a more decentralized system as we are approaching, there would be 24/8 what they're doing there and what life is like there. And we'd be hearing about the average Chinese person and the situations and the horror stories and things like that. Like the fact that we're talking about climate change with this kind of hysteria was something that might theoretically happen 100 years. This is happening now. And it's happening to a billion people and a billion innocent people. And
yeah.
you could go on all day. On the other hand, the thing is, and this is one of the reasons I did write Dear Reader and spoke so much on North Korea. And this isn't a knock, this is just human nature. Americans don't care about Asian people.
Mm.
They're like these weird people on the other side of the world. Like, who cares? And it's kind of in some sense you could tell them why should they care? This is again the other side of the world, but there always is this sense of the Orient is this alien place that's not our concern, and they're always going to be weird. And that's been the story of Asian people in America in the West for centuries. Like these freaks from basically another planet, and everything about them is crazy. So that's an issue as well. I just also think the ties in a decentralized system between the CCP and American outlets would be much more exposed because there'd be much more organizations being like, red flagging this stuff, being like, hey, here's the chain. This person is operating, through getting paid by or indirectly under the payroll of the Chinese authorities.
But after 10 years of woke madness, don't Americans see the parallels between what they had been put through and something
No,
like the Cultural Revolution? I mean,
no, they don't know what the Cultural Revolution is. Are you crazy?
you interviewed a woman who, uh, what's her name?
Lily?
Lily, yes. Um,
Lily Tang Park, I think her name. Yeah.
yeah, Park? No, she's not Korean. Another
No,
Asian woman.
Lily. What's her last name? She ran for New
Tang.
Hampshire Congress. I'm being
Yeah,
racist.
yeah. Oh my gosh, that clip went viral. I loved it. She was like
Lily Tang
yelling.
Williams. Sorry. Yeah.
Yes, Tang. Yeah, Lily Tang. That was a great interview. But that's the kind of thing that I think, the kind of media that you put out, your interviews with Jordan, your interviews with Trig about what socialism is really like, what the Cultural Revolution was really like, what totalitarianism is really like. And I guess to your point that it's not just mainstream media, but it's also the failure of our education system. It is not told at
Right.
all. And
I think that's by design.
I think so too.
The
Yeah.
blood's in their hands.
But okay, so this is back to my thing on TikTok because I know you think that the university, if you look back at all the crazy madness over the last few years, the culprit, you hate the corporate press, but the one you also really pin the blame on is the university
Yes,
system,
they're
right?
the villains. They're the worst.
And I'm like, beyond that, that is actually why TikTok's worse and should not actually be allowed to influence Americans. It's because if you think the university system and the way it could and has corrupted our youth for such a long time, because those seeds were planted decades and decades ago,
Sure.
TikTok is is worse because the
I'm
stranglehold it has on its digital fentanyl, firstly, and the
Wait, hold
stranglehold
on. This is why I'm going to cut you off. This is where I disagree with you. Even if they're worse in terms of the malevolence, being from TikTok is never going to give you the status that a Yale degree is. That's the problem. So you're not ever going to be you. The Ivy Leagues are by design creating the next generation of America's elites. That's why the university is more dangerous than TikTok.
but the fervor in which these young kids, I mean, I don't know if you heard the story about what pushed a lot of the congressional folks to actually vote in favor of a TikTok ban was there was a widespread campaign by TikTok, which were sent to all the young people's phones, popped up, and based on their geolocation, just told them, hey, this is your senator's number, call them, leave a voice message, write letters, protest what they're doing, which is the legislation to ban TikTok or to force the divestment. By the way, it's not a ban; it's a forced divestment. And these young kids were calling in, threatening to kill themselves, threatening to kill the senator. And actually, just recently, somebody's office in Wisconsin was firebombed. That was swept under the rug pretty quickly
A
because of this.
congressperson?
Yeah, in Wisconsin, like
Oh
outside the
wow.
office.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, the fervor in which this app, which is so addictive, and people are so emotional about it. So imagine if, just thought experiment, China was going to make a move for Taiwan tomorrow.
Sure.
What that app would do to people's minds and the influence that it could have on any decisions that the American, defense establishment takes. It's quite big. Do you want a foreign adversary, someone who we might actually be going to war with, actually having that lever of control over what our young people can see and not see?
I haven't done any research on this at all, so I'm not disputing anything you just said. The one point I would make is I think it's pretty clear that our foreign policy establishment operates almost entirely independently of the democratic process. So, what would happen if they're trying to take Taiwan? People could be. This happened in the Bush years. People were losing their minds. It's like, too bad we're doing this. So I think that's really an example of where the illusion of democracy really falls away. There's barely even a pretense that American interest in the rest of the world is going to be responsive to, you know, the population's values.
But do you think that online discourse has shaped the perception of Israel?
Oh, sure,
In
of course, but I'm saying I don't know to what extent. I don't know if this is an issue to what extent divesting TikTok is going to resolve this.
Okay, no, I see what you mean. And it's a fair
And
argument.
I think it'd be very easy for the CCP to have a shell company in wherever you want and have another app. Now, what is more interesting to me is this seems to be a very Brave New World situation where, okay, they've hacked the human mind, right? If they figured out a way where they can manipulate people through this app, there's a trilogy of books called uh, um, uh, what it called? When the hold on, the White Mountains was the first one. There was a trilogy of books, the Tripods. It's a sci-fi series for kids called the Coming of the Tripods, where basically these aliens came and they took over all civilization, and then there was like a little remnant of people, and they had to like f off to Switzerland, right? And how they
Mhm,
did it was they had this TV show, and everyone put on these caps who were fans of the show, and they became obsessed with the show. Then the British government tried to ban the show, and then there were these riots, and then basically everyone's putting on the caps, and they were under control of these tripods of the planet. That
mhm.
sounds very analogous to what you're talking about, but long term, I'm not an advocate of democracy at all. If the human mind is this um,
Valuable.
malleable and hackable, that is not compatible with a system where sovereignty is vested in the majority, because the majority are never going to be critical thinkers in any society, nor and they shouldn't be expected to be. Not this idea that everyone should have an opinion on everything is deranged. And it's really effective because, like, if I have to have an opinion on everything and I'm trying to raise my kids, whatever, well, I could just read the New York Times and they'll tell you my opinion should be. I've done my work. I'm educated, right?
Yeah,
So it's a
yeah.
very effective way to maximize the power of the corporate press. So this is just a long-term, and again, decentralization, I think, is a big answer to this, because it's very hard to herd cats if they're having 10 different opinions, all across the political spectrum. So I don't know. Trump just got inaugurated, yesterday. I'm
Yeah.
very I'm very hopeful
Me too.
that the media is going to take a massive hit, and I'm very glad that we dodged a bullet and haven't become another Great Britain, because they were just waiting. Hillary was talking about this in 2016 about fake news. That was her idea. They really want what you have in the UK to have it here. Folks, head over to malice.locals.com, where Melissa took questions from supporting listeners. Melissa, we're running out of time. What has been your favorite part of this interview?
Definitely the casual and formal racism.
You are welcome.
Hey, it's Adam Carolla.
And this is Dr. Drew. We're back doing our podcast 3 times a week, talking about current events, health news, and more.
So, if you miss us on Loveline, check out the Adam and Dr. Drew show. New episodes Wednesday through Friday, available wherever you find finer podcasts.
Pluto TV is the place for movie fans like me.
And TV fans like me.
They've got something for everyone, and it's totally free.
You can binge laugh-out-loud sitcoms like Frasier.
And rewatch cult classics like Higher Learning.
Whether you're in the mood to solve a little crime before bedtime with NCIS or Tracker.
Or curl up with a surefire hit like Forrest Gump.
Run, Forrest! Pluto TV has thousands of movies and shows, all for free.
Pluto TV. Stream now, pay never.